We will now continue with Simone Angelucci from Majella National Park in Italy, who will talk about wolf conservation and eco-health in the national park. Simone?
Good morning.
Hey.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Thank you. I thank the organizers for their interest in the situation, in the state of the wolf population in Apennine Mountains, which I talk about in this presentation. Our experience has been developed in Majella National Park since 2002 by means of ordinary wildlife monitoring developed by our zoologists and the staff of zoologists and vets, management of damages to livestock caused by large carnivores, as we will see later, and monitoring the health status of wild population with passive monitoring and, in some cases, proactive programs of sanitary surveillance. Recently, these experiences have been brought together in the Wildlife Research Center, where researchers, students, biologists, and vets from different countries are hosted also during the international training courses, as in this case, you can see at the last international course of capture and handling of wildlife in the last November. The Majella National Park is a 75,000 hectares protected area located in south-central Italy in Abruzzo region along the Apennine chain at about 150 kilometers from Rome. It includes 39 municipalities, 4 of them having their historical center inside the protected areas. 3 provinces, and it's more or less neighboring to other national parks on the south part of the region, Abruzzo, Lazio, Molise National Park, and the Gran Sasso Laga National Park on the north side. And it's of high ecological and conservation value for the safeguard of the Apennine wolf, the Marsicano brown bear, and the Apennine chamois, and other wild mammals. As you know, Majella National Park has one of the best preserved Apennine ecosystem, and this is a certified wilderness area of 15,900 hectares with a platinum wilderness quality standard. Okay, in Abruzzo region, the wolf never disappeared. The mountains of Abruzzo have been a source of wolf throughout the Italian peninsula. This territory was one of the first in Europe to be studied for the presence of the wolf, when this carnivore in Italy was strongly at risk of extinction. The Majella Massif at that time represented, after the strong contraction of the population in the second post-war period, one of the few islands where the wolf had remained despite the scarcity of wild prey. This is the distribution of the wolf in Italy in 2012, transmitted to the European community in 2014 by the report of the status and trends of priority species. The presence of the wolf now affects all mountain areas in Italy, foothills and much of the hill of the Italian peninsula and much of the Alps. So the issue and debate on the management of the wolf, which up to 20 years ago was about a few Italian areas, now is one of the main issues of wildlife management, which affects all region and all Italian administration of mountain parks and reserves, despite being a problem known to all, is instead known to few, indeed anyone, the total number of wolves in Italy, because for years it has been difficult to develop an exchange and a flow of comparable data between administrators and even among researchers. Today, this dialogue is going better, but the heterogeneity of the methods used just allow us to make only rough estimates of the total number, which could be around 2,000 individuals. What is really changed in our mountains is the presence of man and human activities. 4 centuries ago, on Majella Mountain, called the Mother Mountain, there were about 1 million sheep and goats, while today there are only a few thousand. Up to 50 years ago, most of our mountain villages had populations about twice those of today, and most of the land at the foot of the mountain up to 1,200 meters above sea level were cultivated with the cereals and the legumes mountain. Today, the man's presence is concentrated mainly in the urban centers and the large areas of land on which were established 20 years ago. The parks have been abandoned and left to a sort of a rare wilderness process. But certainly, the wolf we have today is a wolf ecologically different from what we had in the 70s. The latter ate mostly livestock, small mammals, garbage, so he did not need to stay in the park. The wolf of notice is a wolf who eats very little amount of food of anthropic origin, but almost totally of wild ungulates. And to do this, he has to regain the function of the pack. The about 750 square kilometers of Majella National Park are located in South Central Italy along the Apennine chain. Now here we have 11 resident packs living inside and outside the park boundaries, more or less 100 wolves in 1,000 square kilometers. This is, I think, one of the most high density population in Europe, not to say in the world, but in a territory that have 39 municipalities and more or less 10,000 inhabitants inside. So it is an intellectual, political, and managerial challenge. And as an institutional commitment, one of the first activities we have to develop dealing with the wolf presence in a national park is to pay the damages. So, as may be usual, we start to know the wolf by way of damage compensation. More than 10 years ago, we developed a standardized and digitalized procedure for a damage assessment that foresees a field investigation made by a forestry corp and the veterinarian of the park. This procedure allows us to collect information on assessed cause of death to ensure presence and farm assistance, rapid and effective compensation, more or less in 60 days, limitation degree of discretionary power, understanding the context and vulnerability of the grazing lands or of the sheepfold, planning a concrete and well-adapted prevention measure, and defining on field the needs of coexistence. But above all, to understand the interactions between predators, prey, and the environment. These are data on wolf predation upon sheep and goats occurred in Majella National Park from March 2002 to March 2007. 98 events, more than 500 preyed animals. We can note that the most affected months are between July to October, and with regard to the weather condition and times on the day, most of predation rain or fog in the afternoon or clear in the nighttime. Moreover, to better understand the cause of farmer vulnerability and favorable condition for wolves' attack on livestock, predation we divided in two different groups depending on the number of animals killed per attack. Small predation, less than or equal 5 killed prey per event, and the large predation, more than 5 animals killed in each attack. This is obviously an empirical subdivision, but it helps us to analyze the multiple killing on domestic animals that show itself as a phenomenon that we can observe in relation to particular phases or needs of the wolf life cycle. As you imagine, this multiple killing peak in the autumn when the new puppies start to follow the chasing pack, or when they need a hunting school display by adult wolves, or in relation to particular environmental and managerial condition. As you can see, the most of small predation event occurred with rain and fog in the afternoon, and particularly in lands with bushes. Some attacks occurred with clear weather and in open grazing lands in the nighttime. Analysis highlighted a different trend between small predation and large predation in terms of environmental variables. The 42% of small predation occurred during the afternoon, while the majority of large predation happened at night, and the clear weather was recorded for the 47% of large predation event. During night in open areas, the number of sheep preyed within a large predation event were significantly higher than those preyed in small predation. The statistical analysis highlighted a significant difference between the two clusters on the variable moment of the day in which attacks were carried out. But what seemed to be the determinant factor for the happening of multiple killing events are the management variables. 100% of animals spread during night outside any fence was abandoned at the moment of the attack. In short, animals lacking any form of protection at the moment of the attack often not come back to the sheepfold for management failure. And 73.7% of heads preyed in metallic fence and 100% of those preyed in electric fence was protected by an inadequate number of dogs, less one dog for 100 heads of livestock. And so, given that we know the factors of vulnerability for this specific area and for this specific, I wonder what kind of prevention we can consider for these different conditions. The electric fence, for example, can be useful, but is not sufficient if not combined with the presence of employers or shepherd dog, and is not adequate if the farm is not accustomed to use it. The metallic fence, mobile metallic fence, just used to reinforce the sheepfold, but more dangerous for the likelihood of traumatic injuries and death for suffocation in case of lack of guarding dogs and panic caused by the wolf approach to the flock. Or little mobile homes to strengthen the custody in the nighttime, or hut for pregnant sheep and lambs that don't go on the pastures. And we have also to wonder if domestic animals are crucial in our wolf population maintenance. We have 8,000 sheep and goats, 1,000 cattle, 500 horses, and we pay for compensation of damages 40,000 euros per year, more or less. And we know, just considering our wolf population size and our amount of killed animals, that livestock has a paltry role in the maintenance of wolf pack. In this situation, we usually do wolf monitoring activities according to a protocol specifically produced for a life project called the WolfNet project, using 5 commonly used different techniques: radio-collared individuals monitoring, photo-video trapping, genetic sampling, wolf howling, and direct observation. And already 15 years ago, applying this monitoring protocol, even before putting radio collars to animals, we were able to verify this hypothesis of the low value of domestic animals in the diet of the wolf, analyzing wolf food habits relative to 9 different pack territories by scat analysis. While the ungulates result the main source of food and accounted in total 91% of frequency of occurrence, whereas livestock reached just 5.87%. And then our activity of capturing and radio-collaring wolves in the WolfNet project, in which we captured a total of 20 wolves. The investigation of wolf ecology has been focused on 4 topics: home range description, home site description, activity analysis, and relation with human presence on the territory. This research activity was deeply related to our conservation action as foreseen in the project. I'd like to highlight just some expected results and following the perspective of research and wolf management. Monitoring of reproductive individuals or individuals involved in pups rearing and pup survival. As you can see in this video, a rendezvous site with the puppies, I hope. Monitoring of den site and rendezvous sites, also in relation to the territory and the neighboring packs, and the use of these different sites in the reproductive period. Through the years, we have also recorded significant shift of the denning site used by the same pack. The territories have proved stable over the years in the neighboring territory, feed each other, and each blank area. Then we were able to establish the presence of another pack. And this is also crucial when we talk to our farmers or to our stakeholders, because we can tell them that our population is stable. Every pack is now stuck to the situation of 15 years ago, and the packs do not grow continuously, but they are regulated by the abundance of the prey and by the respect of the borders with the other packs. Recognizing and investigating the dispersal phenomenon of the young wolves, investigating the predation behavior through the cluster checking technique to individuate potential behavior. After the GIS observation of the wolves movement, we had to carry on specific field activity which consisted in the development of surveys at the GPS location and or cluster or of location. And what you can see showed what described with the scat analysis, because the red dots in this picture are the domestic animals predation sites in 1 year for a pack. And the blue dots, wild ungulate predation sites. But in addition, we can get with this technique data also about prey species and age of prey species. We had very interesting analysis about the relation between wolf presence and farming activities. For example, in this case, we can see a sheepfold that was never affected by attacks in 1 year, even if in the core area of a pack territory, because the good level of custody with garden dogs and shepherd. Or, as in this other case, a flock constantly affected by small predation events in summer and the autumn in a bashed grazing land, and with a just guarding dog in a 250 sheep flock. Sometimes we also try to use some additional tools such as special alarms to communicate strange behaviors or mortality, and the virtual fence tool used to prevent dangerous situations with the livestock activities. Developing integrated monitoring system with the GPS collars and photo trapping, we improved also our sanitary surveillance. This is a helper female with 1-year-old wolves, and this is the view. Sorry, this is the view of her deep and chronic interaction with free-ranging dogs and critical human activities. This kind of observation helps us to understand the epidemiology of a wolf population and prevent the health risk. I'd like to briefly show 2 examples of GPS-helped health surveillance. In Abruzzo, Lazio, and Molise National Park, in 2013, there was an epidemic of distemper of some importance. 24 wolves aged 6 months to 5 years were found dead. They were positive for canine distemper virus, and this was the first report of canine distemper virus Arctic lineage epidemics in the wild population in Europe. Following this event, we developed, also with the help of radiotelemetric data, a specific activity of canine distemper monitoring on wolves and free-ranging dogs in Majella National Park, with collecting fecal samples in 3 years in the rendezvous site and also in other critical areas that we recognized with radiotelemetric data. Arctic lineage in all strains was investigated, and an identity of 100% with the strains detected in wolves of Abruzzo, Lazio, Molise National Park, and from 2 dogs. And we observed a simultaneous spreading of virus in dog population of the same area. So this made us realize that domestic dog is the reservoir of canine distemper virus infection in Abruzzo region, and the wolf is the spillover of the virus spreading and new viral strains. In this other and more recent study, fecal samples were collected using a sampling protocol based on the combining data from radio collar wolves with geographic information system analysis, allowing to mark off the home range of packs and to recover group-specific and high-quality specimen. Canine parvovirus type 2B is the most prevalent virus in both packs, followed by canine adenovirus type 2, while no sequences of canine distemper virus and coronavirus were detected. So there were no more traces of epidemic event for canine distemper, but the sequence analysis of the virus demonstrated the domestic origin of the infection. So, highlighting the importance of free-ranging dogs management and vaccination of local dogs in order to reduce the risk of exposure of wildlife to these pathogens. One of the most important objectives of the LifeWolfNet was the use of the real-time data analysis in order to promptly individuate both the risk factors and risky areas, and in the worst cases, to promptly realize the death of the animal as well as mortality causes. This concrete and innovative approach allow us to plan and develop the activities of specialist operational groups, trained staff dealing with wildlife illegal mortality and wildlife crime investigation. Well, to round off quickly, the wolf-human interface in this scenario is continuously evolving and needs to be monitored and managed to guarantee that the initiative undertaken to promote coexistence between wolf and human presence are appropriate, effective, adapted to the specific ecological and socio-cultural context. Sometimes this means that you have to work more with the farmer than with wolves. And moving in this direction, we carried out several activities such as veterinary and managerial assistance for the farmers, reimbursement for sanitary expenses, provision of guarding dogs, etc. And in this direction, we developed also the initiative of a program for the restitution of the sheep and the establishment of the park flock as a concrete attempt to create a new way of compensation of damage. Understanding the needs of the stakeholders is crucial in the development of conservation and management action for wolves. Sometimes the causes of conflict do not reside directly in the coexistence with the wolf, but into the complexity of the problems that affect the farming activity on mountain. So it is possible that if you ask to a farmer that lives in one of the most wolf-populated places in the world, what are the really critical issues in managing his farm, he can answer that he is very worried for the sale of the product, the low value of the product, the lack of competitiveness, the lack of the skilled labor, the high production cost, and only a small part of the farmer responses indicates the wolf as one of the main problems for the economy of livestock farms. And this kind of analysis, as important as the research that we are able to perform on the wolf population, it is essential to understand in any territory where the man and the wolf meet, the conditions that define the new wolf-human interface. If farmers are accustomed to constantly guarding their livestock, and if institutions assist farmers with small and often inexpensive activities, but focused on the analysis of a specific local ecological and cultural characteristic, the wolf is not a problem for mountain farming. This is so true that often the shepherds who are accustomed to having a good level of custody of their flocks, while living in a territory with a high density of wolves and being surrounded by wolves day and night for years, they can never even see them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Simone. It was a very, very interesting presentation. And we also cooperate on this topic, of course. So So we've just in a project that we are involved in called Livestock Protect, been there in Majella and spent some very valuable few days with you. I would like to open now the floor for questions from the audience. Let's see.
No questions.
Okay, there is a question that came in privately. What is your experience? How do local people perceive large carnivores, and whether this has changed over the time?
Never disappeared. So people know very well the wolf, but is not enough to ensure a conservation, a good conservation scenario, because the wolf population is increasing in the last years, not just the population in the national park, because as I told before, the park density and the number of individuals in the park are regulated by the abundance of the prey they have. But what is happening in Italy now is that a lot of dispersal wolves from mountain areas are going to hills and in surrounding territories of the cities or big villages in the hills or in the flat or in the coastal area. So what is important is to have people that work on wolves monitoring and monitoring also the wolf-human interaction, because all is rapidly changing. What we need is people that work on this, not a lot of money, but a lot of attention for the stakeholders, above all in new areas that are colonized by wolves. Because in a lot of situations, the stakeholders in new colonized areas are not useful to have a prevention method, but just they are not used to know the wolf. So a lot of bad information that come from new area are not confirmed by scientific data, but just with the increase of strengthness of information by social media and press release.
And you also do extensive research on various different topics regarding wolf conservation. And do you have a chance to distribute your research findings, for example, or do local communities then receive these results? For example, antibiotic resistance, that latest research. Like, do you basically have a chance to inform them?
Yeah, of research that come from the use of radiocollars in the wolves, but also in other wildlife. And one of these is the eco-epidemiological analysis of the interaction about interaction between animals, interspecific or intraspecific interaction that allow the spread of pathologies, or also in sometimes the carnivores that are on the top of the pyramid, ecological pyramid, in some manner can show us some very important ecological issues. Like, for example, as you told, we found in a recent work, we had two wolves radiocolored in two different packs. One pack was in the center of a wilderness area, and one pack was at the border of the park, and also outside the park in a very anthropized area. And there was a difference between these the samples that we had from these different packs, because we found antimicrobial resistance for tetracycline antibiotics coming from the pack that are outside the park or just on the border of the park, and no from the pack that is inside the park, in the central area of the park. So we can also understand very important issues from the eco-epidemiological point of view. That is a big issues also in this time for the COVID and for other critical situation on the interaction between humans, wildlife, livestock, and environment.